Hang tight, everyone. We'll be here in 1 minute. All right, Ken. I like to surprise Ken by starting the stream at random times while our countdown timer is going. you never know what he's going to be doing.
It's like running in. It's like, oh my god, I was just in the bathroom. Hold on, let me get here.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us this week for the Created Economy. I can't find my script. Oh my god, this is just already a mess. Too many windows open.
Maybe instead of trying to prank me, you should actually be focusing on
I prank myself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good job.
Thanks, everybody. But yes, in case you haven't been here before, this is a weekly interview series where we interview voices and players from the creator economy at large. We discuss key topics impacting the growth of the creator economy for creators of all stripes and shapes. We do go live on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and you can find out more over at created.show. It's the official show page for our show. We also stream on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and Twitter Spaces. We just abandoned the clubhouse. Forget it. Bunch of jokers over there. Yeah, too much work to get the clubhouse to work. So if you want to join us on Twitter Spaces. Also, we can share links with you, so it's way better. Also, if you do want the longer form content, some of our longer posts, although I don't think we've written anything long form in a long time, it's over at createdeconomy.com. But I'm about to start testing out Jarvis to start writing posts. I'm going to put them under Ken's name, see if it works.
Same thing. Same result. Don't worry about it.
So let's just jump into our deck real quick. I know there's a couple of things we want to go through for the bookkeeping purposes because I always forget to use the deck, even though I made it. But yes, this is episode 13, by the way. In case you don't know, we do 2 shows a week. On Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time, Created Economy. You are listening to that right now, and we're watching it. And in addition, on Friday mornings, we have Creative Briefs, which is our news show. We try to give you a roundup of all the latest topics and news from the week in the creator economy. So feel free to tune in at 8 a.m. Pacific time on Fridays as well. You can follow us on every channel, any social channel, basically, at Created Economy. We are on Twitter, Twitch. We would love your sub on YouTube because Ken wants to get to that monetization sooner than later. And of course, we're on Flipboard. And if you are listening, make sure you share a tweet out for our space so that other folks can join in as well. Today, we are lucky to have our friend Maarten Walraven joining us. He's the head of operations and production at GÂRDEN, which is a live streaming venue in Rotterdam. And Ken, for a second, the way that I, one of our primary ways of meeting new folks and friends in the creator economy is actually from the Means of Creation Discord.
Mhm.
Oh, I need to make a slide for our Slack, because did you know the creative economy has a Slack also?
We
I-
are great. We are great at creating. We really suck at marketing.
Creation stuff is a lot of work. I don't know who said this was easy, but they lied. But on the Discord many months ago, actually, it took us that long to get Maarten finally, like, finding the right time and everything. But he'd done this amazing post about what the music space, actually, and sort of all the tiers of super fans, etc. We connected, we chatted, and I instantly was vibed, and I was like, all right, dude, can you join us for the show someday? And finally, thanks to all of the crazy scheduling, we've made it happen. So without further ado, let us bring our friend Maarten into the fold. And Maarten, do you want to take 2 seconds or a minute, whatever it may take, just introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit more about you and
Yeah.
GÂRDEN, of course.
Thanks, Greg and Ken, for having me here, first and foremost. Calling in from the Netherlands, where it is 11 p.m., or well, 7 minutes past 11. So it's a slightly different time.
I took so long to schedule a time.
Yeah, so I'm Maarten, and let's see, what should I say? I have a PhD in history, and it was about the history of sound. So basically about how like people connect through music, sound, or how they create conflict through all of that stuff as well. And as well, like, developments in technologies and the way that sound influence that. Then I finished my PhD and I started working for a TV channel, as you do, which was a classical music TV channel and a jazz music TV channel. And then those two channels were acquired by Stingray, a Canadian media company. And in that sort of past 5-6 years, I've been a part of all the changes in the TV world. So, from linear TV to on demand to live streaming, and then back to linear again. And then I now started my own thing, which is GÂRDEN, together with partner Arjen van der Straten, who's also Dutch. So we built a studio in Rotterdam, which is geared for live streaming. It's called GÂRDEN, and the idea is that there will be many of these places, just like there are audio studios all over the world right now. There will be audio-visual studios which are geared towards live streaming, and live streaming is here to stay, but it's going to be a little bit different than just pointing cameras at people that are playing. We're going to create real shows. We're going to co-create with artists. We're all about artist empowerment, and we'll talk more about that, I guess, as we go into music and the creator economy.
And just for status check relative to the state of GÂRDEN today, is
Yes.
is the venue open already? Are you already producing or streaming from there?
We are testing our first stream tomorrow.
Whoa! All right.
Ooh.
We should have waited till tomorrow to do the show.
Who knows how I would have sat here. So it took us like 4 months to build the studio. It's a box in box, which means that the floor is not attached to the floor where it's built, and the walls are not attached to the floor, etc., etc. So all soundproof, and yeah, that took a while to build, of course, and now it's done, and now we're testing. So we're getting the first artists in, and then the idea is really to start locally from Rotterdam and the Netherlands and Belgium, and then just move out towards international artists. And eventually GÂRDEN is going to be so cool that every international touring artist is going to want to come, of course.
So can we talk about how did you get into the music space? I know you've written a bunch around music, the future of music, right? In all its forms. But your history, your background from being having a degree in history to working in media, how did you get to focusing on this and focus on music, and then also how does that translate into looking at something for creators?
So, I mean, it's going to be the standard answer. So music has always been a part of my life, although not standard is that I don't play an instrument. So I've always just been somebody that enjoys listening to music. And then from working in venues and working at festivals and things like that, I've always sort of noticed how hard it is for artists. And then, yeah, spending years kind of at, everything that I kind of did with the whole broadcasting. So at Stingray and with the classical music and the jazz, and we did karaoke as well and stuff like that. But that's all at the end of the production chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you broadcast it, everything is done and finished. And I was always very curious how that went on at the beginning of the production chain, right? Before you get to distribution. And yeah, as well with the newsletter with Music X, it's really that is about music and technology and innovation, and where is it going to go next? But it's also very much all the time in anything that I do. It's about artists and how musicians can try to navigate all of the various things that they need to do, which is not just make music, but also a ton of other stuff.
So can you?
Oh yeah, I was going to say, what are some of those things? I guess when we connected, you sort of like we're positing, like with Spotify trying to make all musicians into creators. I guess to Ken's question, like is in your mind, is there a distinction between sort of a musician and a creator, or what are the commonalities versus sort of things that make them unique?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So basically, I see musicians as kind of proto-creators. It's like they were always doing this, even decades ago, just because of the sheer number of different things they had to do. But then on the other hand, they also are still not creators most of the time, because they just make an album. Mm-hmm. Most musicians are still geared towards making an album, releasing a single, doing that, and then going back into the studio, maybe touring, and then in 3 years' time you have another album out. Whereas, of course, creators need to kind of have a way to continuously connect with their audiences. And for some musicians, that's not so difficult. Mike Shinoda is a good example, who's got a good Twitch channel and who takes his fans into his studio with him, develops his records, gets feedback and all that sort of stuff. But that's not for all artists, of course. Mm-hmm. So there's an interesting discrepancy there in terms of, who you are as an artist, what your creative vision is, and how you can share that with the world. And then, of course, there's Daniel Ek's famous remark that, everybody should just be putting out music all the time, because that's how his algorithm works.
Right.
Musicians should release more music more regularly.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Who cares about an album? Everything is about playlists.
Yeah.
You just want to get playlisted. That's how you get streams. And that just means to release singles all the time so that you get picked up by the album.
So it's very similar to, I guess, the digital creators, right? The social media ones that are like, instead of putting together like a full-length movie or something like that, people on YouTube should just release individual videos, whenever they're done. So Maarten, one thing to kind of, and I know we have a video that we have queued up, but before we get to that, I want to get back to this point in terms of like, what kind of artists are you looking to bring on, right? Because you're talking about there are musicians that are already doing live streaming or interacting with their fans on Twitch or all these other things. Like, it's not to say that, like the Rolling Stones, for example, since obviously they're in the news this week, but they can't. I mean, they can put on a live stream themselves in their own studio. They have the infrastructure, they have the money, the resources to do that. Are you looking at more the up and coming type of creators, those that you might see like the Justin Bieber pre-Usher discovery type of thing, that are like, hey, I want to just showcase my talent on YouTube, but I have no other way to kind of really broadcast. So let me go to, I want something professionally done, something a little bit more interactive. So I'm going to go to GÂRDEN. Is that kind of like who you are reaching out to?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're definitely looking at emerging artists. It can be all genres of music, but we are always looking for we keep calling it like the edge.
Mhm.
So something that is a little bit different, a little bit original. Authentic is a word that comes up a lot in conversation. So yeah, but definitely the key aspect is that they are emerging artists. And I have to be honest with you, there's also a practical element to that, because as soon as you're signed to a major label like Universal, it gets so complicated with rights. So it's much easier as well to deal with artists who still control, what they make.
And so I guess let me ask you a related question, I guess, and or maybe two questions. How does live streaming play into sort of this ecosystem relative? Is it furthering the role as musician, or is it furthering the role as creator? Like, I guess, like, if you think about your mission, obviously the function is live streaming, but to what end, I guess, do you imagine, or do you have like a bias towards trying to help musicians be one way or the other more?
Yeah, I'm afraid I do. So the bias is, I guess, best explained is you can also see GÂRDEN as like a content factory. So if you see musicians as being a part of the creator economy, that means that they need a ton of content. That means they need video. So when we produce a live stream in GÂRDEN, we make sure that they get a music video for their YouTube. If they are on TikTok, they can get TikTok videos. If they're on Instagram, they can do Instagram stories. And we can edit all of that for them, and we give them that as a kind of package they can take away and have like 4 months of content for their social interactions with their fans, whichever platform they use.
So before we go any further, Greg, why don't we queue up that video and show
Sure.
it for people that are watching, and for those that are on Twitter Spaces, we've tweeted out or we posted a link to where you can actually learn more about Maarten's publication, but then we'll also be tweeting out the link to find more information about GÂRDEN later on.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, and if you are listening in Twitter or watching on video, just feel free to leave questions or comments. We'll try to pass them along to Maarten as well. Maarten, I'm going to bring the video up. Let me know if you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, you might have to annotate. I'm not getting any video. Sorry, everyone in Twitter. Is this the actual location?
This is the actual location. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's basically our venue rider. So we sent this out to artists, managers, to show them what GÂRDEN is, what they can expect, how we try to bring them into different worlds we want to showcase. We'll showcase their creative vision.
It looked like you were playing an instrument there.
I was trying to pretend that I can play bass.
It's like that. It's like when you look at that side mirror, it's like objects appear closer than they seem. It's like it's all visually appealing.
Is this quality of video kind of the type of video you're hoping to produce as well for the musicians?
Yes.
Interesting. That's super cool. And what kind of turnaround time are you anticipating kind of in this approach?
Short. So what we have in mind is that it would take about a day and a half to edit everything that they would need.
Okay.
And what would the cost be?
Oh, sorry, Ken.
Oh no, sorry. But what would the cost be then?
The cost is for the artist. Well, when we book them, it's not a cost for them. It's part of the package. So we pay them a fee, and they get content. That's the deal.
Oh, interesting. So is their audience also like kind of at the same time, or?
Yeah, but it's behind the screen like we have right now.
Got you.
It's definitely live streaming. It's for people who sit in their homes, right? It's not for people who go out, which is also why it has to be unique and interesting, which is also why we need buy-in from the artist. They need to really believe in creating something that is a unique show. What we need from them as well is time in advance. So to talk about what they want and how we can do that. It's just the studio does a ton of different things. I mean, you can see it. We have like there's a green screen. You can work with a VJ, yeah, but you can also do tons of stuff with light and just do various. I mean, you can go as crazy as you want, and we can probably do it. We're getting one artist in, for example, who is going to be like his show is going to be this absurd Monty Python-esque thing, with also like some pre-recorded elements, which are kind of like commercials, but then totally over the top. And his idea of like interaction, which we really value with the audience, is that he's going to do like this fake tarot card reading, and he's going to call somebody who's watching and do that for them.
So this is this a combination of, you could do it either like have a concert live versus pre-recorded?
We don't want to do anything pre-recorded. The musicians have to play live, but we can have pre-recorded elements that we can put into the stream. Because there might be a point where somebody wants to change their guitar or retune their guitar, and it takes 2 minutes, And if you're at a gig, you would have some banter, or it would be quiet, and the audience would start shouting and screaming and all that sort of stuff. But in the live stream, I mean, the key element for artists to understand when they come to us is that they're not standing in front. We're talking about emerging artists, so if they're not standing in a venue with 150 people in front of them, they're standing in front of a camera, and behind that camera is one person 150 times, and each of those 150 people needs to feel that they're really playing for them.
Right. So you have an artist that comes in to perform, and you're paying them a fee already, and so in order to recoup your cost and to make a profit, you are advertising said musician across on the internet, whatever's like, hey, come to
buy a ticket.
Okay, so there's a ticketing platform that you offer, and so you take 100% of the ticket fees.
We take 100% of the ticket fees up until the point where we will get artists who would get more, and then we would do a rev share after we recoup the fee.
Gotcha. So this is very much a equivalent of, like, I guess in the US, like a Ticketmaster or a Live Nation type of thing, but specifically on a digital live stream internet perspective.
Yes, we try to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true. Because also we sometimes talk to people and they say, "Oh, but can we also just like white label your platform?" And we go like, "No, but it's an interesting thought, of course." But yeah, we sell tickets, and we also sell subscriptions to GÄRDEN.
Oh, okay. And what does that subscription get you? Like, so that subscription allows me to attend concerts, like X number of concerts a month or something like that?
Yeah, it's a scale, of course. So if you pay more, you get more. The cheapest subscription will be you get to see one show a month. Mm-hmm. And then it goes up. And then in the sort of next 6 months, so this our second 6 months, we're also aiming to start working with residents. So artists that we believe in so much that we think that they can showcase more of themselves than just one live stream show. And these artists will also be, if you get into a higher tier, you'll support that sort of residency ship.
And how much? And so I guess this is more of a question about like a chicken versus the egg. Like, which came first? Was GÄRDEN an idea pre-pandemic or during the pandemic?
Yeah. So my partner, the founder, Arjen, he his idea pre-pandemic was to set up a venue. Mm-hmm. A small venue for artists in Rotterdam who are just starting out, who don't have anywhere to play, basically. Simply because it's lacking in the city.
Right.
but of course, the pandemic hit, and he stopped pursuing that for obvious reasons. And then the kind of idea became, well, that's also when we met. And then the idea kind of became something of a cultural music incubator style thing, which is now still our kind of like 5 to 10 year goal. But first, it's now a studio.
Can you give me an idea, and also our listeners an idea of the musical community that is in the Netherlands compared to, places like Berlin, New York, LA, those type of places, right? I mean, how does, and also how do you view Garden scaling in the next, let's talk about 5 to 10 years, right? Because if you're talking about, you're very much just in one spot, but what if I am an artist here in the States, but I'm like, I want to be able to take advantage of this. I have to fly to the Netherlands to leverage this, or will there eventually, over time, there might be one spot in New York? And I kind of equate what you're doing to what YouTube has done with YouTube Spaces, right? They have a spaces where they have these locations around the world, where like in LA and London and I think in Tokyo, where creators can go to create videos, not necessarily do live streams, but actually produce videos. Do you see that kind of like as a model for Garden?
Yeah, definitely. So let's just go through your question. So first of all, the music scene in the Netherlands is super diverse, of course. If you just look at Rotterdam, the city we're based in, it's already fantastic. There's a lot of hip hop, there's a lot of indie music, there's a lot of electronic music. But then, of course, the Netherlands is basically as big as New York. One city in the US is the size of a country here. And if you go to Antwerp in Belgium, it's closer than if you go to like the city in the north of the Netherlands, which is called Groningen. But yeah, I think, well, what we hope is that we can kind of establish our role as this live streaming studio that does really good things with artists, and then build that out into this incubator, and then replicate that success elsewhere in the world. So for sure, the idea is to have Garden in Denver, in Hamburg, in Marseille, or Barcelona or wherever. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And also, just one more thing,
Yeah.
because you said like, how can an artist in the US, for example, take advantage? One of the things we've consciously done is that we've set up a foundation, which means that we can also take advantage of the subsidy system here in the Netherlands. We're already talking to some artists about like creating unique things that will allow us to tap into that subsidy money, the grant money, to bring artists, for example, from the US to Rotterdam.
Cool. Greg, you got anything?
Yeah, so I get so I think it's very interesting because I didn't really realize, I guess, that you were blending the sort of ticketing into the experience. But the idea, so just to reframe, the idea is basically that artists, musicians are coming to do some kind of performance, but it's a virtual audience always, for the most part, right? And that subscription is sort of potentially to a network of these venues wherever, right? So if there's 12 gardens, in 12 cities,
right? In 10 years.
A subscription is basically like I'm getting access to, like all the stadiums in the world or something, which are virtual stadiums in the world, basically. That's very cool. And so the premise, though, I'll dig into the creator side of this, I guess, a little bit. So as a musician or an artist coming into the venue, can and by the way, how's it set up? Is there like dozens of cameras or something like that? Or
right now we have 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be built out, but 4 cameras definitely allows us to capture the entire space.
And does that allow now? Is there like multi-streaming? I guess at the same time. So, is the creator, is that artist or musician also like say bringing their own fan base into the streaming as an output? So they can simultaneously simulcast to say their Facebook or their other places at the same time, or
Yeah, but we'll probably what we're currently thinking is that we'll allow them to do like one song, and then they have to go and buy the ticket to see the whole thing on our Garden platform. Yeah.
got you. And then do you will you? So I guess there's like a co-selling model potentially too. Then like where the band could be sending or artists could be sending people through.
Yeah, and I mean, we basically one of our ideas is that their marketing definitely in the beginning is going to be much stronger than our marketing. So we just want to empower that.
Right.
So, you know, just a super simple example, instead of spending advertising money on our socials, we will also spend that on their socials, right?
Yeah, right.
And through that also help them understanding how that works for their own future.
So it's an educational system. There's an educational model as well. To both, you're helping teach these artists how to better market themselves or better to optimize their streams and reach people digitally, while they're also giving you the content as well. What is like? How do you see GÄRDEN stacking up against others that are in that space? I mean, I think it's easy to say like musicians are, there's a plethora of musicians to tap into in the creator economy space, and so as such there are a lot of startups, a lot of incumbent tech companies that are doing something in this space. Whether, I mean, obviously you have like Spotify, you have like YouTube premieres, which very much could, I would imagine, might be a big concern for a company like GÄRDEN. There's a bunch of these other companies that are innovating in creator tech for musicians. Like, how do you see the industry, and how do you see yourself standing out from everybody?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on. But then at the same time, live streaming is kind of like this thing that's been happening for 10, 12 years. But nobody really took notice of it. And a lot of people did not take it very seriously. And then in the past year and a half, we've definitely started taking it seriously. And we're doing it in a variety of different ways. I mean, Spotify, for example, with their shows, those are all pre-recorded. So one of the things that is going to make GÄRDEN stand out is that artists are actually playing live. This also means that they can mess up, right?
Right.
That's part of the charm. Also means we can mess up, part of the charm. Hopefully we won't do that too much, but it can happen. And I think that where we really are going to stand out is in the concept of it. So the fact that we really are going to create something unique, something that is a show, and something that's going to take advantage of that sort of mindset that I was talking about earlier. Is like the people are going to have to make sure that they know that there's a camera. And going back to a point I made earlier, that's probably not going to be for all artists, right? That's okay. There are musicians out there who are just not going to be happy in front of the camera, and that's totally fine. But for those that are, we can help them optimize how they perform, and not just them, but also their music and their whole sort of creativeness and how that's going to come out.
So when you broadcast, I was on your site earlier last night, and I saw a video that you had this artist, and I kind of really showcased because I was curious in terms of what you're talking about, like how do you make these shows more interactive? I'm like, I'm not really. I wanted to kind of see what the potential is, and I kind of saw what you're showing with graphics being thrown on the screen, and it's very, very digital, very interactive. And I'm curious in terms of the distribution, right? Because you talk about how you are leveraging an artist's social media presence to hype up their performance on Garden. But is their actual show being distributed just on Garden's domain, or
Yes.
or is there a way to syndicate that onto YouTube, to syndicate that to wherever, and then who owns that content afterwards?
So, of course, there's the option to syndicate it. I mean, from the at the when we start, we're using Vimeo, right? As a kind of backend to our live streaming platform, and Vimeo can do that. I mean, we use a switcher from Atem, which can also do that. So there's a ton of ways to do it. But what we care about is that we get people in who are also going to be invested into watching it. And we are not that keen on people who are just going to, see it and watch it for 2 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever it is, and then go away again. Because we really want to showcase intimacy. We really want to show an intimate side to the artist, and we want them to tell their story. And that happens in hopefully about 40 minutes. Because that's the kind of attention span that people have as a maximum.
It's interesting because it feels to me like you're almost like ClassPass, right? Like to some degree, right? Like there's this, like conceptually, there's a lot of these concerts that I could go to, or performances I could go to. And it does seem like there's an interesting content layer here. I'm actually curious, even stepping a little out from where Ken's question was just how does all that programming, set design, like what's the timeline? Let's say an artist is coming in, and I want to perform at Garden. Like, how long do I have to prep? Like, is there a budget that's sort of available? Like, or like to walk us through, I guess, more of the process. But then I also feel like almost like I want an inside the Actors Guild sort of kind of moment, like sitting down and having like a fun interview and offering something a little extra that, like to Ken's point, in a normal concert, you don't have someone interviewing the band, right? Or you don't have like sort of any of these other kinds of aspects or interactivities like we have a space live. You could take questions from people streaming, like listening in the stream, right? As opposed to just purely performative one-way sort of thing. So I'm just curious about like the entire program design for an artist, like from sort of that first moment through that execution. Like, what does that process look like? I know, and obviously it's early and you're kind of working through it, but what are you
right now? But I think the minimum we would need is a 1 day with the artist to just talk, basically, and then another day to like fully prep in the studio with them, which is a good commitment on their side. We are talking like there's 2 artists from Rotterdam that we're already working with, and that we've already had multiple meetings with, and that you can see how much time it takes to just kind of go from I'm going to play my songs to I'm going to play my songs, but it's going to be very different because I'm going to have cameras and I'm going to talk to people that I can't see, and I can have like smoke and mirrors and visualizations and projections, and I can, do synchronized movements or whatever. It takes time. So preferably, there's a hotel next to Garden, so they know.
Well, there's an interesting company based out of Denver actually that came out, and they blew up. Elizabeth is the founder, called Suna. And Suna's business essentially was they created sort of like I think they refer to themselves kind of like a Kinko's for photography, right? And they're much like you're kind of describing. So I wouldn't say the level of complexity is the same, but what they do is they originally started with in-person photography, like where you could come to a place and if you wanted to do product shots, everything you could imagine was like in the room. It was kind of like when you go to karaoke and there's like that bin of garbage for you to figure out what you're going to be, right? But they had like, all the masks and not masks, but, sort of backdrops, et cetera, like the equipment. And then they had photographers on staff. When the pandemic hit, what they found out was that no one could go into those places, but they succeeded pretty significantly by making it remote. Like, so what they did is they turned it to the edges and they said, well, we have all these photographers who have all the gear already. They have this stuff set up at their house probably. Why don't we just have the stuff start going to them? And so soon as started becoming, in addition, I think they still have physical locations, but they also started becoming like this router to some of the best product photographers out there where they could scale infinitely, right? And it seems to me like the Rotterdam location seems like a great prototype, but I almost wonder, couldn't you get to this? Like, if I'm a fan, I want the footage from the garage, right? Like, I want where you're practicing, right? Like, I want all of that insider access.
So you want like an MTV Unplugged type of behind the scenes type of thing.
I want the GÂRDEN app to be the streaming interface where you might still help with the production and all the other stuff. Like, but I almost want you to be like the production house where, hey, we can just send you raw stuff and maybe we can go live and it still gives us the ability to still interact with our fans in real time. Mm-hmm. But also it preps and builds towards the performance whenever I'm going to make it into one of these primary locations, or maybe again, physically into the real world.
I mean, that's very cool.
Martin's like writing this stuff down. It's like, I just need this recorded for later. We just there goes Greg giving away product roadmap ideas for free. I mean,
it just strikes me that seems like, because obviously it's very capital intensive to physically build.
Yeah.
But I almost, to your point about the authentic part, that low tech, low budget stuff, like feels super powerful to me, right? From a band point of view, from developing and building and fostering real relationships, to that creator point of view where you're working and building with an audience together, right?
Exactly.
It seems very powerful.
Our vision so far, so since we get the artist in beforehand, we want to talk to them, interview them, show them practicing in the studio. That's a great question. And do that, but then in like the time scale of the couple of days that we have with them, and using their channels and using our YouTube channel or our Twitch channel, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I'll go to Mr. Hanglide's question in a second, because I think it's interesting because, and maybe I framed it this way poorly. When I hear live streaming, also maybe because I'm building a live streaming platform, so I have a lot of preloaded concepts about what it is. But your definition of live streaming, actually, usually when we hear numbers about live streaming, is probably closer to the proper stats given about what the live streaming industry sort of entails, right? Like, it's performative, it's events, it's venues, right? It's TV, entertainment stuff. It's not classically the live streaming that happens on social media. And not to say it's exclusive of it per se, but usually when you hear the big industry stats, it tends to be this bigger ecosystem, much like a higher level production, which obviously I understand why you're fitting into there. I think the questions I've been pulling at and sort of what Arnold is asking here, and I'll repeat it for our friends in Twitter, is sort of just the idea of like getting more to that social sort of streaming as opposed to say the quote unquote production or live streaming. But Arnold's question, is any future plans to add a way for the artists to see the folks they're streaming to in order to help the artist feed off audience's energy during the performance? So you see, I guess I hear your version. I guess in the few minutes we have left, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of what, like Arnold is pointing out. What I'm sort of pulling at, I guess, is the more social aspect, or sort of maybe the buffer that exists around these live performances, which may be the cherry on top of something bigger.
Yeah, and I mean, interactivity is super important for us because it's one of the key things that makes live streaming interesting. Against going to see somebody perform in a venue. And what Arnold's talking about is basically a confidence monitor. That's what it's called. So you put up a big TV screen, and you put people's faces up there so that you can see them enjoying your show. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have the capability to do that. But more importantly, I think, is how can we make sure that the feeding of the energy goes one step further and doesn't just replicate. It's like, oh yeah, so I am standing in front of these 150 people on this stage and they're standing slightly below me, and I'm fantastic. Is how do you actually make them interact?
Hmm.
And that's why we try to come up with the musicians and the bands that we talk to with these crazy things. It's like, how cool is it that you're going to be called by the artist?
Yeah.
Or how can they influence what you're doing? And again, this has to be something that has to be natural to who you are as an artist, because it has to work. It has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just something we come up with and
No,
tell
no,
you to.
sure,
That
for
doesn't.
sure. It's interesting. I see our friend Jeremiah in the audience. So Jeremiah, I moderated a panel years ago. It was called Short Attention Span Theater at Web2, and Jeremiah was on it. I believe his framing that was the most distracting panel he'd ever been on. But I had wired up. It's actually the precursor to Zealous, if you believe it or not. It's probably like 2005 or 6. But I had wired up a way for the audience to control the slide deck live during our panel using Twitter. Right?
Why would you do that? You know it's not going to end well.
It was like weird science, It's like you got to just try connecting things to see what happens. But what we did was,
look at the festivals at that time as well, right?
Yeah, this is very early days, right? It was like running in a JavaScript, running on my laptop. But the audience could like change the background. They could like, and the folks that were on the panel, they like we monitored them, and I could pull their tweets above their heads and stuff like that. I love this because I believe that given the interactive version of anything, it will tend to win over the static version, right? Like, this is like why our larger sociological logical change, cultural change towards experiences versus ownership, I think it speaks to the exact same thing, right? That we want to be involved and interact in a process. And I do think that like it seems like there's so much room for innovation and opportunity here for what GÄRDEN is doing is in increasing that. Now, obviously, it's a little challenging to some degree because the artist has to be maybe performing, or you need to create spaces or venues or breaks that allow for that to sort of overlap better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really the key element. And the only moment you can start creating those breaks is when you've got everything else, sorted. So that's definitely our first step.
Yep.
And then our second step is to like see how crazy we can go on the whole interactive thing, which also immediately links into the intimacy thing, which we think is so important because it'll just immediately showcase personal things from the artist, right? Which is what audiences love to see and hear.
Maarten, I'm curious in terms of how you get these, how you secure these creators, and kind of like the whole, and kind of getting to Greg's point in terms of the process. Some creators, artists, musicians, you have joining the coming to participate to perform at GÄRDEN may have small social media followings, right? Some may have larger media followings, right? Because they may have been out on the circuit for quite some time. How much of that following, that community that they bring in factors into, one, you signing them for, hey, you want to do a show, and two, in terms of like the how much promotion you give to them? Because on one hand, it's I mean, in a way, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, it's like, oh, we get somebody with a large following that gives us opportunity to promote, they can help promote GÄRDEN on a wider scale, right? On the other hand, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I have 100,000 followers, right, but I'm not signed to a big recording deal, and I want to use, and I want to perform at GÄRDEN, can you handle the scale of people that might be attending, right? And of course, more people that attend, the more tickets that are sold, the greater your profit and whatnot. How much of that factors into the overall process?
We have so many discussions about this. So we have a clear artistic profile, right? But we also do not want to be rigid in that. Mm-hmm. So there's a GÄRDEN playlist on Spotify called GÄRDEN Seeds, which is where you can just hear everything that we would love to book, basically, at GÄRDEN. But then when you talk about this with like the programmer, with Arjen, the founder, I'm sometimes involved. There's multiple people that sort of move in and out of those discussions, and they all tend to kind of always disagree on this.
Mhm.
And in the end, it comes down to like this gut feeling about how you feel about the artist, right? Because some artists may only have like, I don't know, 400 people on Instagram, but they would still be able to pull in a lot of ticket sales because they have a different type of fan base, so it's super difficult to put those metrics together in a consistent way and make them help you in your programming. And at the same time, we're like totally addicted to them, so we keep talking about it.
Right.
Do you plan serialized sort of appearances kind of upfront, or is it like you see how it goes after? Or is the idea to wait and see per performance?
Yeah, we'll wait and see per performance.
Okay.
And then hopefully in the future we'll work together with people that we want to give free reign and do serialized stuff.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what GÄRDEN is doing is pretty interesting, especially as you get them get the emerging market, the emerging artists, the edge artists, right? I mean, because they don't have necessarily the resources to do that, right? I mean, they may be out there performing at cafes, they might be performing out on the street, they might be buskers, subways.
Yeah.
Obviously, that can't happen now. I mean, there's a lot of disruption in the industry in the world right now, and so, but having that opportunity to perform, right, and still get and maybe this can help them get discovered even more, right? It's like, oh, maybe there might be someone from a big record label. It's like, hey, I see Greg performing on here. I just happened to buy a ticket, right? Because of somebody told me to do it. And that makes it easy. It's like, oh, I want to sign that individual. Plus it also gives we see some musicians who have their own merchandise too, right? Instead of saying like, I guess back in the days, like, oh, buy my CD, at the show, buy my CD or buy a t-shirt or whatever merchandise. Now you can promote, hey, download, like click here to join my, Patreon, or join my, or sign up, follow me on YouTube, or download my, sign up for a merch, NFT, whatever, right? I mean, you can do, kind of build a more community that way. And maybe it's also more cost favorable, more cost friendly, budget friendly, to say, instead of constantly having to go into a studio like and pay like tens of thousands of dollars or whatever it is for live streaming, I can just go into GÄRDEN, right, and kind of make it to what Greg was talking about, maybe like a series, right, and say like every Friday I'm going to perform at GÄRDEN, a new track or whatever, because it's not going to be like a 2-hour show, right? I mean, it's these live streams are probably going to be like 40 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour, give or take, right? So it's an abridged version of what you might see in a concert.
Hour is pretty long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be very interesting to see how it goes in terms of what you do with GÄRDEN, especially if you can expand that across to other places.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself like 5 minutes ago how well we did to not mention anything related to Web3 today, but then you mentioned NFT.
Ken, always.
It's a subtle. Hey, I didn't mention the specific phrase Web3. I mentioned tangential, right? So there you go.
One of the tools.
Well, we are just about up on time. However, Maarten, any last thoughts or closing info you want to pass along for the audience before we wrap up and then head to After Dark?
I don't know. Maybe just like, if you are a musician and you're thinking of live streaming, make sure that it's something unique, and that's just totally different from just performing your songs. That's the most important thing.
I hope to see more content from you in this arena as well on Music X, because it's a great resource for anyone in the music space or the creator space, honestly. So highly recommend giving that a look. Maarten, thank you so much. We will see you in a few minutes at After Dark, which is our after show. But in case you want to know who's coming in next, by the way, next week we do have Stephen and Antonio joining us from the Black Creator Crew. It's been long in the making. We've been trying to have these folks, but scheduling, always scheduling is complicated.
We'll always blame that. That's always the reason.
Very excited to have them both here to tell us about what's going on with the Black Creator Crew and how they are helping Black creators succeed in new and interesting ways. Upcoming as well, don't miss this Friday, of course, 8 a.m. Pacific time. We have our Creative Briefs news show. Jim Louderback is joining us on September 8th. On the 15th, we have Lilyhan Scott from the Lilypad Network. On the 22nd, make sure you tune in for Josh Constein from Signal Fire. If you'd like to be our guest, by all means, head over to creativeeconomy.com/guest list. It's a way to see all the upcoming guests as well as to put your name in the hat to get make an appearance here on the show. As I mentioned, we always welcome questions and comments. So keep your hands and comments coming. And we look forward to seeing you. As I mentioned, though, we are going to head over to our after show, which is run and hosted over on Zealous. If you head over to created.show/live, or just head over to created.show, you'll see a link right on the front page for After Dark. Feel free to join us. It's our off-the-record talk. You can ask all the questions you were too scared to get up here and ask, or all the questions that Ken and I forgot to get to. So by all means, we'll see you soon over at After Dark. Once again, it's created.show/live. You'll join us for After Dark, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday or sometime in the future. See you, Ken.
See ya.
All right. Cool.